Welcome to OkState Daily. Casey Porter joined by Robbie Rainwater, as I am each and every week. Coach, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. It started off disappointing, not getting any runs in the Friday game, 15 strikeouts, and then it finished with a bang, a really good, just kind of a gritty, dig yourself in, win the last two games against a good TCU team, a top 20 TCU team, a TCU team that many people thought would win the Big 12 this year. So a good weekend overall.
Yeah, start the season ranked in the top 5, I think, every poll. But yeah, it's like you said, start off kind of slow and then end strong. And I think that's, indicative of what you're going to see and the things that we've talked about as far as, trying to get deep into pitching counts early in the series against a starting pitcher and try to get to their bullpen. It seems like, college baseball now is the quicker you can get to the bullpen and the deeper you can get to the bullpen early in a series, the better chance you have in game 2 and game 3. And I think that's what you're starting to see as far as, maybe the different approach offensively early in the series versus at the end of the series. So, but yeah, overall, pretty impressive. Nice to get Schubert back and pretty impressive overall for the Pokes.
Yeah, and also the defensive part of it. Hey, we cover the whole entire thing. You have to if you want to be objective, if you want to talk about baseball. The defensive thing, does that worry you? Is that something that you just need more reps, just let the season play on? Is it something you need to start shuffling your lineup with? Where are you at with the defense of this team?
Yeah, more reps I don't think is the issue. I mean, these guys are one-sport guys in college, and they're playing all through the fall, and they've had plenty of reps. It's just about making the plays, and it looks like, whether it's bunt coverage or just some routine plays here and there, it's just, I look at some things at third base and some bunt coverage things that with our pitcher, looks like Garcia has struggled that in the last couple of starts. We have a couple of pass balls by a catcher at times, maybe crossed up or that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily needing more reps. It's just, make the play, and it's the things that we've talked about as far as, our pitching throughout the entire year, with maybe the exception of Dallas Baptist. Our pitching staff has done a great job of keeping us in ball games and putting us in position to win, and getting the timely hits is key for OSU. But when it comes down to the errors, and I think we talked about this maybe last podcast, is they don't show up as big in a 14-5 ball game, but man, they're very glaring and stare you right in the face when it's a 1-0 ball game, especially when that one unearned run that is scored is happens because of the errors. So that's got to get cleaned up, and I don't know if that requires some shuffling, around the infield or something of that nature, but that's going to have to get cleaned up if we're going to continue to compete and be successful in the postseason.
Offense is like clockwork, man. 15 strikeouts in the first game to only 5 hits and then only 3 walks. In the last 2 games, at least your hits and your strikeouts, I believe the Pokes only had 2 less hits in the last 2 games than they did strikeouts in total. So, I mean, it's like clockwork with this team. It's not necessarily a total amount of strikeouts, it's whether they are doing other things around that can at least make up the difference for that, and they did that in the last 2 games.
Yeah, and even going back to the midweek game, against Missouri State, I think what you can really look at is, in a midweek game, it seems like the approach, whether it was going back to the OU game or, against Missouri State or whoever it is, you see a totally different approach at the plate during the midweek game. And I think you can attribute that to the fact that in a midweek game, going in that you're going to see 6 to 8 pitchers, right? You're going to see the starter maybe go a couple innings, and you're going to get 6 or 7 guys that throw an inning apiece or maybe a little bit more. You're not worried about getting to the bullpen because the bullpen's coming, right? You're going to see 6 to 8 pitchers during that midweek game. So you're aggressive from the first AB. And then you start the weekend series on a Friday, and it just really seems like, the goal or the mission on that Friday game is who can get to the bullpen first, right? Can we get to the opponent's bullpen first and get deep into their bullpen, giving us a better chance on Saturday and Sunday? And I think that's pretty much the logic on both sides, whether it's the home team or the visiting team. Yeah. And then you start to see that aggression with the different approach at the plate on Saturday and Sunday come to more fruition of being more aggressive at the plate once that has been established. I think what you're seeing, though, is college baseball is starting to turn a little bit more old school and allowing their pitchers to throw more pitches. You see the Tully kid throw over 120 pitches on Friday. You see Garcia throw over 120 pitches on Friday. You see Holiday throw, 115, 113 pitches on Saturday. And so I think it's becoming harder and harder to get to the bullpen. But in my opinion, I think that puts OSU in a great spot because I really like our bullpen. When you start talking about guys like Krantz and Molsky and Dominic Reed and those type of guys, I think that puts us at a huge advantage with those guys. But offensively speaking, and I've mentioned this on several podcasts now, the more aggressive OSU is at the plate, the better they are. And, just seeing that Friday series, it's almost like you go into the Friday series knowing that they're not going to be as aggressive, trying to get to the bullpen. And I don't think it plays to OSU's advantage playing that way.
Totally agree. I think the Cowboys need to figure out a way to get Jackson Kroll and both Zach Earhart. Zach Earhart in his last 4 games is hitting over 500. He's hitting close to like 450 in his last 13 games. And by the way, he's done it by hitting hard ground balls, line drives all over the field to the entire field, not trying to lift the ball, not trying to hit home runs. He's gone back to in my opinion, the type of offensive player he actually is, similar to Jackson Kroll. And that shortstop the Cowboys have, Lane Forsythe. You talk about a guy that knows the type of player he is and plays to his strengths. I love that. Tyler Wolfert also has gone back to just being a guy that's used in the big part of the field. Line drives up the middle. He had so many of those hard hit balls right at the other team. It was great to see him get paid off Sunday with that little dinker in right field. You mentioned Nolan Schubert being back in the lineup. So the Cowboys, in my opinion, they need to figure out how to get Jackson Kroll, who has scored a run in almost 75% of the games that he has played in, and Zach Earhart in a game at the same time. Can you imagine that as one is the 1 hole and the other is as the 9 hole based on right or left pitcher that day?
Yeah, and going back to something you mentioned about Earhart and Jackson Kroll and Wolfert and those guys hitting more line drives and ground balls, I think that goes back to a lot of what we talked about early on with the injuries that OSU had and guys having to play out of what their natural position lineup is that
and trying to perform differently than maybe they're capable of. Yes, great point.
Absolutely. I mean, those guys are line drive ground ball type guys where when we had the injuries early in the season, they were having to try and be gap to gap guys. They were having to try and be power guys and put into a position maybe in the lineup that didn't naturally suit what they were really good at, and we've talked about that at length. And I think when you get Schubert back like you did this last week, you start to see maybe those guys getting a little bit more comfort of not having to, whether it's subconscious or it's a conscious effort. Either way, I think they feel more comfortable in the role that they're playing now as opposed to being in a role that didn't naturally suit their abilities or their skill set. And so, and talking about Jackson Kroll in particular, that makes it real tough, when you have your first 5 or 6 guys in lineup that are lefties, when you're facing a lefty pitcher like you did on Friday with the Tully kid, having to play those games and those matchups. But I think what you see with OSU is how good our left-handed hitters are against left-handed pitching. And especially Carson Bench. Carson Bench, I don't have his spray chart, but I bet his spray chart is heavily favored to the left side of the field.
Yep.
And that really favors him against left-handed pitching. And so, it's going to be interesting how those lineups play, whether it's lefty or righty. I'm a guy that here's our best 9 hitters, put them in there. I don't care if they're righty or lefty. And it's going to be interesting to see how they mix that up with Miola and Earhart and those type of guys, just spreading those righties out through there. So you don't have maybe, 5 or 6 consecutive left-handers to maybe play some games with the bullpen and the coaching staff trying to decide the opposing coaching staff trying to decide who to put in the middle of the game or late in the game. But seeing those guys, I think what was Earhart 4 for 4 in one of the games, and they were all ground balls between short and third. Seemed like, But it goes to your point of, and the things that we've talked about is those guys. I think you're starting to see, feeling more comfortable in the role that they're playing now that you're getting some guys off the injury, and you insert Schubert into the lineup. And, if you've got guys like Schubert and Brigman and Miola, those type of guys in the middle of your lineup, you don't need more power guys. You need those guys to get on base for those guys to drive in. So, yeah, it's good, and it's fun to see and exciting to see how that lineup and the offensive side of the ball is starting to progress.
Earhart was 5 for 5 in the Saturday and Sunday victories. He had 7 hits total on the weekend. I know he was a pretty big-time prospect on the infield, played some shortstop, played some second base. Would you be opposed to moving him back to the infield, maybe to get him and Kroll in the lineup at the same time on occasions?
No, because one of the things we talked about too is where do you put Schubert? I don't think Schubert can just be your DH, because then you limit, who's going to be, Jackson Kroll has been your DH a lot this year as the leadoff spot, right? And we've talked about how that's a little bit unique for OSU. But, if you move Earhart back to the infield, that opens the outfield spot for Kroll or Schubert. Maybe moving Carson Benz to center field or something of that.
Is it too late to do something like that in the season?
I don't think so. I mean, you're not halfway through yet. Now, we've talked about OSU, being a team that I feel like could get hot middle to middle late and towards the end. And by the time that the West Virginia series this weekend is over, you're going to be halfway through the season, not counting postseason, obviously, but halfway through the regular season. And I think you still got time to make those plays. But, it just depends on, where they want Schubert in the lineup. Do they want him just as a DH to try and, not re-injure or aggravate the injury that cost him 12 games? And, I don't have all those answers and know everything that goes on with that. But I don't think it's too late to shuffle some of those things. But, Earhart plays great center field, and, Colin Ritchie has held down left field very well. And obviously Carson Benz plays well. He's had a couple of drop balls or something in right field, but I don't think that's a talent issue. So, it'll be interesting to see how those things play out. And I think you just got, Earhart's a guy that, his dad was a two-time draft pick, and his brother was a draft pick, and
he's legit.
I think in the Red Sox organization currently, and so. He's the kind of guy that he reminds me a lot of a college teammate I had that was our leadoff guy named Landon Wall. But he's the kind of guy that he's very intense. He seems, there's not, he's the kind of guy you go out to eat with, and he orders a water with no ice, and he's just one of those guys that's very intense all the time. Seems like, I don't know him personally, but it just seems like, and he's going to get the job done no matter where you put him. So it's a good problem to have, 10 or 11 guys you want in the lineup regularly, but you can only put 9. So, or I guess you can put 10 with a DH. But it's a good problem to have, and it'll be interesting to see how that all shapes out.
Boy, how about the pitching over the weekend? Brian Holiday with the complete game against UCF. Of course, he got taken out in the 9th, and the Cowboys lost that game in the bottom of the 9th inning, so didn't take that chance this weekend. Went ahead and finished his game. Complete game for Brian Holiday. You can't say enough about him. And Sam Garcia, man, 7 innings and no earned runs for him, 9 strikeouts. And then Robert Kranz came in and pitched really well. And then Sunday, I know that Gabe Davis, he got his first start as a Cowboy in a Cowboy uniform. No question about it. He's from Choctaw. He played for the great Shane Hawk, who was a great pitcher at Oklahoma State, who does a great job at Choctaw with the entire element, especially pitching. So he wanted to perform to the best of his ability. He was nervous. It was his first start. It was a Sunday rubber game. I mean, hey, that was a huge game on Sunday, man. The weather wasn't good. So there's a lot of reasons why that thing could go a little bit sideways for him. But still like the fact that the Cowboys and the coaching staff's trying to figure out the best way to use him. And so the pitching was just, other than maybe the start on Sunday, the pitching was simply fantastic.
Yeah, and that Sunday game, with the weather coming in, it was a little bit drizzly, and then you have the weather delay and all that kind of stuff. So that didn't help the situation either. But going back to Garcia and Holiday, I said on the last podcast that I was a little surprised that they took Holiday out in that UCF series after the 8th inning, and we kind of joked about, did they have to hog time to keep him from going back out there and that sort of thing. And you saw what he did going over those 100 pitches, going 113 maybe, I think is what the number of pitches he threw. And I think it's something that you said, is that his third start?
Yeah, over 100 pitches.
Going over 100 pitches, and so it just seems like college baseball is kind of taking on that a little bit of an old school mindset, a little bit of letting those guys get higher pitch counts and feeling like they're capable of doing that. And it's I think, going back to things that we've talked about, and I think we've mentioned on every podcast, this pitching staff has kept OSU in almost every game and given OSU a chance and has performed very well, and having a bullpen like we have with the guys that we've talked about, whether it be Reed or Krantz or, even bringing Benj out of right field to close the game out. Drew Blake, all those different guys that have pitched very well from the bull. Molsky, who's probably my favorite pitcher on the staff.
Boy, he was nasty, wasn't he?
He just a bulldog. He comes from, and I looked this up and I kind of joked to myself about it. I believe it was him that in high school he the mascot for his high school team was the polar bears, right? And it kind of just fits him because it's like he's a guy that's got ice in his veins, and no situation bother him. He's the same guy no matter what the situation is. He doesn't get real high, doesn't get real low. He just goes out there and it's just nasty, so anyway, but yeah, the pitching staff has been very impressive all year long, and I think that plays a huge strength to OSU and puts them at an advantage in every series, not only with the quality of starters that we put out there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but also the bullpen we have.
Want to go back to a decision on Friday. Of course, Oklahoma State did not score. They got their first two runners on, I believe it was the sixth inning. Josh decided not to bunt.
Bunt the baseball.
See, I'm the opposite. You got Aiden Miola up, man. I do not take the bat out of Aiden's hands. For one, you don't know if you're going to have another chance to score. Try to take the lead there. I get it that you have to tie the game before you take the lead. I don't take the bat out of Aiden Miola's hands. One, because he's a great hitter. He's hitting almost 400. Sure. And two, because he's been very, very clutch in his career, no doubt about that. And three, as we saw on Sunday, there's a really likely chance that Aiden Miola, if he gets to two strikes, he's just going to shorten up, put the ball in play, and advance the runners anyways. So I think by not bunting, you gave yourself every opportunity to win that game. Of course, that's a great debate.
Yeah, and obviously, if he hits a double in the gap and you win it, then it's the right decision. And if it plays out like it did, it's the wrong decision. It's a catch-22, and it doesn't. It's just one of those situations where you look at, and the things that we've talked about: be aggressive, be aggressive, be aggressive. They were, and it didn't work out.
Yeah,
darn near hit the triple play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you look at it and say, OSU had 5 hits that game, and 3 of those hits came from the 2 guys that followed Miola in the lineup there.
Yeah, there you
go.
And
so do you play to your strength of saying, you know what, we're better when we're aggressive, and we've got our top hitter at the plate right now, let's let him go after it? Or do you let the guys that have had the hits in the 3/5 of the hits in the game have a chance with runners at second, third with 1 out? So I don't have a problem one way or the other. Obviously, I was saying bunt a while ago, but that's only because it didn't work out.
And that goes more to your style maybe than necessarily specific situations in a game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I have no problem putting it in Miola's hands.
Yeah, right.
We've talked about him about being a gritty ball player, and we've mentioned that on several podcasts. And I have no problem letting Miola go up there and be aggressive and try and be the hero, even though that's not the objective for him to be the hero. But put him in a situation. I mean, if you had to draw it up before the game started and said you're down 1-0 late in the game and you got runners in first and second with no outs, and you got Miola at the plate, what do? I think 90% of the time you or I, or maybe 100% of the time, or 90% of the population would say, let him swing away. Right. And
I would,
because even though, Ortiz, Brigham, and Wolfert were behind him, and I believe Ortiz had 1 hit in the game and Wolfert had 2. So you had 2 shots after Miola if you got second, third. Well, now you got 1 out at second, third potentially, and you got a freshman at the plate, and is that what you want? And so
with the base open, so they're going to pitch around them. They're going to try to use the freshman against them, get them to swing at bad pitches.
And if you got a base open, they put Ortiz on, then you've got a lefty coming up in Brigham with a left-handed pitcher on the mound. So, and who says if he does bunt that we do have second and third? I mean, we may bunt it back to the pitcher and we got first and second with 1 out, and so instead of first and second with no out. So anyway, I don't have a problem with either one of the decisions that would have been met in that situation. I sure don't have a problem, because I've been advocating on this podcast for weeks now of more aggressive at the plate, more aggressive at the plate. You get it, he rolls over one, hits it right at third base when it doesn't work out, and you get beat 1-0. But I don't have a problem with that either way, that whatever call's made on that situation.
I just feel like Josh went with a hunch. He did not go with the baseball book. The book would say bunt right there, tie the game up, let your freshman hit a 17 hopper to the second baseman, go tied into the game as the home team. That's what the book would say. I think Josh was just went with a hunch. Hey, this is my dude, and hey, they've got a guy on the bump that's really freaking good, and I'm not exactly sure we're going to ever have a chance to score on him again. So let's take our shot right here to win the game right here. So I like the fact that he put the game in one of his best hitters' hands and let it eat from there. Just, we said it all the time, Coach, kind of like taking Holiday out in the ninth inning of the game against UCF. They mapped it perfectly. Sometimes you do things and even it's the right decision, and in this game it's just such a game of failure. It just doesn't always work, right? Right,
and part of that hunch too is, Miola ends up going 0 for 4 in that game.
Yes.
Right. Well, he's hitting what, over 330 or around 350 for the year right now. So he's due, right? This kid's going to get a hit every third at bat, and here's his third or fourth at bat. He's due to hit one right here. And so again, I obviously am not the guy that has a problem with them being aggressive, because that's what I have advocated for with this club for all season long, is that the more aggressive they are, the better they are, and the more successful they are. And so I don't have a problem with him being aggressive in that situation. Going to Tully, talking about Tully, we've talked about on this podcast how important it is for Oklahoma kids to play against in-state rivals, whether it be OU or Oral Roberts or those type of games. And we've also talked about how important it was for those Florida boys to go back to UCF and be successful. So when you look at Tully, now this is opposing dugout, do you not think it meant just as much to him being a UConn boy and not being heavily recruited by OSU or OU, and coming into OSU and getting to pitch game one in the weekend series? How important do you think it was to him? Along those same lines of us talking about the same way it is for Gabe Davis or Kroll or Avery Ortiz or those type of guys play against OU, I think what you saw from Tully is a performance that is indicative of that mindset of him coming back to Oklahoma and pitching against OSU in a big time. They were talking a lot about the book on this guy was 90 to 91. Well, he lived at 93, 94 the whole game, and I think what you saw there is the things that we've talked about as far as how important it is for Oklahoma kids to play against Oklahoma teams. It just so happens this instance, it's an Oklahoma kid playing against an Oklahoma team, but he's playing for a team in Texas, and so it's just another point to that mindset or to that philosophy of how excited those kids get to play against in-state teams, whether they're for another in-state team or they're playing for a team out of state.
Do you get excited still about the Wichita State series? I know that was just hot, man. I mean, it was Gene out there dropping his F-bombs and Gary Ward not backing down to any of it. And Chemnitz was right in the middle of all of it, probably egging Gene on the entire time and adding his 2 cents too. That was a lot of fun, by the way, but it's not the same. It's really not the same. But do you still get excited about the Wichita State series?
Absolutely. And I still tell, watching Chemnitz come out of the dugout and just chew on an umpire until he gets ran out of the ballpark, you know what I mean? And then he's still standing there 2 minutes later after he gets run. But, and I was actually, at one of my son's high school games the other day, I was actually talking about the kid from Wichita State. I can't remember his name, but, the big righty that was going to be a high draft, and a kid was trying to time him up too close to the on-deck circle, and he throws at him and hits him. And it cost that kid. I think the kid lost an eye over the deal, and it cost draft status. I don't think you never heard much of him after that. But I still get excited about that series because whether it was obviously again you're a little bit older than I am, but that was a big series back in when I was growing up. Oklahoma State, Wichita State, and even
Gene when being I was from Guthrie, Brent being from Perry, that was big.
And even when even prior or after being out of college and still going to the OSU games when Wichita State would come to town. So, yeah, I think, the Cowboys versus the Shockers, I think will always have some appeal, and have a lot of Oklahoma kids, or Guthrie in particular that, have played at Wichita State. So,
Joey and Toby.
Yeah. And so that's an exciting series. And, for longtime OSU fans, they know the history of that series and still get excited about it.
No doubt about that. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, Coach? It's been a great podcast. It was a good weekend, an exciting weekend coming up, a 4-game road swing. You're going to Wichita, which is kind of like, that's pretty close. I mean, you can run up there and check out a ball game. By the way, I go watch the Wichita Wind Surge whenever they play Tulsa up there in that new Riverside Ballparks, I think what they call it, right there downtown. Matter of fact, their old Lawrence Dumont facility, the old professional facility when they were the Wranglers and they were the AA affiliates of the Royals, they tore that down, and in the exact same location. I don't mean like similar, I mean like the exact same location. They rebuilt this new Riverside Ballpark, and it is beautiful. But X Stadium also very pretty. So Wichita is a great place to go watch a ball game. So super excited about that tonight. So any final thoughts?
No, just looking forward to. I like the midweek games just from the standpoint of getting to see, a lot of different pitchers, getting to see our bullpen guys come in and throw an inning apiece, or maybe get stretched for 2 innings and get to see the bats fly around and be aggressive at the plate. I like to see that approach, and I'm hoping that every opponent from here on out throws their Friday guy at least 120 pitches so that we can start being more aggressive on Fridays. I say that jokingly, but that's kind of, I like to see us swing the bat, and having Schubert back in, or just him standing there in a box and just his physical presence alone, and then his first game back, he goes 2 for 3 with a home run. And so I think it's setting up to the things that we've kind of anticipated and talked about of OSU potentially being able to get hot and make a good run middle to late in the year and make some noise in the postseason. So it's shaping up to be that way. And I think we've got 11 or 12 guys that can be counted on and got a great pitching staff, and it's going to be exciting to continue to watch.
Coach, appreciate it. I want to appreciate everybody for tuning in and watching another edition of the OkState Daily Podcast on the baseball side of things. And until tonight, where you can tune in and watch it on ESPN, or you can listen to Rex and the Chief Matt, I want to say thank you for tuning in, and go Pokes.
Go Pokes.